very weird, but yeah.
Okay, so we can start.
Mm-hmm.
So good day, everyone, and here it is, Erudito Podcast, and me, your host, Rapolas. And this amazing day, we also have an amazing person here in our virtual studio again. And here she is. She is an English teacher in Erudito Podcast. The second one actually in our podcast. And she is a super cool teacher. She is also translator, editor, Shakespeare's expert, and everything like else, and we'll talk about it more later. And it is Greta Kaikarytė. Welcome to the podcast. It's
Hello,
very nice to
Rapolas.
see you here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So what's up and how are you?
I'm good. The weather is nice, so I'm enjoying all the vitamin D I can get. I hope you're doing the same. And yeah, just really excited not to be working on a Saturday as it is usually for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, just taking in the good weather. And what about you?
Pretty same actually. I have stuff to do, but I'm trying, to manage the time and also relax at the same time. So,
Good.
So
Good.
you have won like few weeks ago. You have won a favorite teachers award. So how are you feeling? Isn't it like awesome?
It was very, well, it's probably going to sound very cliche, but I was literally not expecting it, especially knowing that it was sort of the most loved teacher in between the primary kids. And I've never taught primary before Erudito. So of course, it's very lovely when your work is acknowledged in that way. I mean, to some it can look like a little award, but it really puts things into perspective and you start to think, okay, so I do have authority and influence as a teacher, which is quite scary,
Yeah.
But at the same time, it just, you feel fulfilled and just very, very grateful. And I think that sometimes this sort of gratitude cannot really be expressed through language.
Yeah.
I think there are certain points, even though, I'm an English teacher and I'm a philologist, you would think that I am quite good at communicating and sort of understanding language as such. But in moments like that, I think that when gratitude reaches that certain level, language just simply fails you because, you can't really express how grateful you feel.
So we'll talk a bit more later about the teacher's job. But firstly, we'll talk, as always, in this podcast about the beginning of yours, like the beginning as a student, when you started, to build yourself. So firstly, about school. How did your time at school look like as a student? Like, was it fun or was it sad, or did you even like school?
I did. I actually, so basically I switched schools every 4 years. I went to primary school and then I went to the most wonderful middle school where I made the majority of my friends with whom I'm still friends today. And sort of, because I'm the oldest child out of 4 children in a family, I was sort of like a trial child. The parents would try everything on the oldest kid and they decided. So I was going to this sort of semi-private middle school, which I really enjoyed. But then my parents decided, how about we try out a state school for a change? And the school was very nice. I think I just sort of, for some reason, I managed to lose myself during my last 4 years of high school. So it was a bit of a difficult time for me, and I wasn't a very good student. It's actually surprising how I even graduated from school. But of course, one good sort of thing that I was good at was English. So basically just, I don't know, helped me out. And so the 4 last years of school was a bit tricky for me. Were a bit tricky, to be fair. And I was not very good at attending lessons, and I was much interested in doing different things. Although I read a lot, and but my basically just my attendance was not perfect, so to
Okay.
say.
But
Mhm.
could you call yourself like a who was like always, trying and trying their best and just, or I mean, okay, my question is more you were
Mhm.
more like who is always, first in the class in between your friends, or were you more that I call bad girl, like that rules breaker and so.
I think the thing with me, I was very good at acting as a good girl, but misbehaving a lot, so to say. And that probably explains why I ended up having a degree in Shakespeare, because certain theatricalities I could not avoid even from childhood. And I was very, always sort of quite dramatic, let me just put it that way. So I was very good at deceiving people into thinking that, learning is my responsibility. And yeah, sort of, it helped. I always had good grades, but when it came to the exams, it really showed that something was not right because I barely managed, like, again, I barely managed to pass them
Hmm.
apart from English. So yeah, it's sort of somewhere in between, neither there nor there, you know?
Okay. Okay. And do you have maybe any stories about your uh, school life? You know, like.
Well, um, hmm, from the school, I remember it's actually the first and the last time I ever cheated. I've never cheated during the lessons. I tried out cheating once, but basically, I was sitting at the very back row of the school, and I remember it was the geography test, and everyone was cheating back then during the geography lessons. And I remember I had my, like a little note prepared and keeping on my sort of legs, or I don't know. I think I've written it on my leg, and sort of the type disguised it,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
something like, or a slip of paper. Yes, it was a slip of paper. And you would think that someone who would be sitting in the back row would manage to cheat, pretty well. But my professor caught me, and she sort of, when she was walking towards my desk, I put the slip of paper under my bum, but like a little part of it was sticking out. So she sort of pulled me by the paper, and I literally fell down the chair with everything, all of my notes and everything. And she wrote me a sort of, she gave me a bad grade. And of course, I started crying, the usual.
Yeah, yeah.
And she ended up like giving me a chance to retake it. And since then, I sort of, maybe it was in a way integrated into my own philosophy as a teacher, that if you have not learned or prepared for an exam or a test, it's better you say this to me directly and write it poorly.
Yeah.
And then I would always grant you a chance to retake it, because things happen. Sometimes you can't do revision, or sometimes it's one of those days where you have decide to have an existential crisis during an exam. So it's always just honesty, a pure and blatant honesty rather than dishonesty. So yeah, and yeah, I just, from school, I was very active in school community. I organized a few dancing events. I wasn't dancing professionally at that time, but I always enjoyed dancing. And so yeah, it was a big part of organizational activities in our school. And we had this sort of tradition to organize dance evenings.
Yeah.
So I did a few of those, and I remember we did a few dances from Sweeney Todd, the musical. I don't know if you ever watched the film with Johnny Depp. So yeah, these are probably my fondest memories of high school years, all the events that we would do. And
Okay.
yeah.
That's awesome. And you later, like in 11th and 10th and 12th grade, you needed,
Mm-hmm.
to think where to go on and what to do later in life and so on. How did you discover English philology? Like, how did you choose
Mm-hmm.
Shakespeare? Why?
So with, again, everything happens, everything was unplanned, but I was always very artistic as a child, immersed in art, and painting, reading, singing. I played piano for a lot of years, and I sort of lost my artistic side somewhere in high school. So I was just very lost in general in life, because being able to express myself artistically always grounded me in my life. And again, as I did very poorly on my state exams, the only thing I did well on was English. And I thought, I love the language. I always felt drawn to it. Somehow it always allowed me to express myself artistically. And it was sort of, I remember this so vividly, because all of my friends, we were sort of having a pint after the exams. And I remember with a friend who's now one of my closest friends, we were just sitting there and going, what do we do? Everyone knows what they want to do. They have already submitted their university applications. And I go like, what about English? Should we just apply to English philology and see what happens? And she had no intention of studying English philology. And she was like, yeah, right, why not? So we submitted our applications and we got in. And our existential crisis continued during the first year of university. And in order to beat that, we did the most crazy thing. We bought one-way tickets to London on May after completing our first year of English philology, and we barely survived during the first year. I don't know how we did not get eliminated, because again, studying was not on our minds. And so we bought one-way ticket to London we did not think we would return. It sort of just, like a few £100 in our pockets, and let's see what happens. And we were 19 at that point, and we worked at the most trashiest, horrendous place in central London. And let me just tell you, it was a lifetime experience. But during that summer, I met a few interesting people in London, and something clicked back at me. And I decided, English is something I definitely want to do. English theater and literature, and sort of to study it theoretically, not on the practical side. I always enjoyed being backstage rather than on stage. And I came back and I became the top student in my class. I graduated with the highest marks. And I remember one of my professors saying this to me. I remember it very vividly. She said that, considering how you were during your first year of your undergraduate studies and seeing you now after 4 years, if I had to pick out a student to say who made the biggest transformation, I would never have picked out you. And it's just surprising she said, it's surprising to me to this day how the transformation happened. But now that I reflect back on it, I think that I managed to reestablish my artistic side, that I lost somewhere in middle school, going into high school, and just sort of inflaming the love and admiration that I have for literature and always had for English language back. So that's the story with English philology. And with Shakespeare, during my fourth year, so basically with philology, you can either go into linguistics or literature. And I chose the path of literature to write my final thesis on a piece of literary work. And when we started studying English literature, we began with 18th century. So we skipped everything that precedes, and I thought, right, and I really need to decide what to do to understand literature and just read better in general. And it was either I was choosing between classical literature, doing a master's degree in classics, and Shakespeare, because that's basically, if you want to, you can pipe down everything to those two, like the classical literature and Shakespeare. but I sucked at Latin. I had a whole year studying of Latin, and it was horrendous. And I thought, no, I would not be able to do all Greek because it's even worse than Latin. And so the only option for me was Shakespeare. And yeah.
Okay. And now looking like retrospectively, are there any specific like characteristics that a student needs to have if he wants to study philology? What do you think?
I would say, again, it really depends on the person, but you need to be prepared to immerse yourself in a language and be open to accepting the language in a way you don't think are possible. Because we've been talking a little bit about linguistic relativity and linguistic determinism during our English B classes and TOK. So once you do learn a foreign language, you absorb it, and the language absorbs you, in turn changing the way you think.
Okay.
And changing your relation to the world and the way you see yourself as a human being, I would say. So if you're not afraid of undergoing through drastic, just, characteristical changes in yourself, then I think definitely. But, and be an avid, sort of, just be drawn naturally, instinctively to languages, I would say.
Okay. And we'll go to another section, about, and we'll talk a little about hobbies. I know that I've heard, that you are quite, you love hobbies and you have hobbies like a lot. So now, how would you what does a casual teacher do in her free time? Do you have any? How would you describe your hobbies after school?
Well, I don't know if it's applicable to all the teachers, but because, some teachers have family things to take care of. I don't have a family, so I'm free to do whatever I want. Well, I tend to read a lot. After school, I read for my work, obviously, and I read for you. And I'm always trying to find new reading material to incorporate in our lessons. So usually after I complete my work day, so to say, I would spend a few hours looking at new material, learning material for you guys.
Yeah.
And then I would just read whatever I want, because that's the most amazing thing about not having compulsory reading curriculum, so anything, it depends. For example, I've been reading a lot about how body goes through trauma, as I'm interested in trauma studies and sort of physiotherapy and everything else. So I've been rereading actually, this amazing book by Dr. Van der Kant. It's called Body Keeps the Score. It's a really interesting one. When the weather is nice, I go for a run. I've taken up running a few years back, and I love it. When gyms were open, when there was no pandemic, during the cold season, I would go to the gym, and I'm like, fingers crossed that they're gonna open swimming pools soon, because I'm an avid swimmer. And so it's just basically reading, watching lots of films, TV shows, and actually dancing.
Okay.
I do dance a lot. I do take dancing classes. So
what kind of dance,
I'm actually, for the past year, I've been doing Oriental dances, because Oriental dances, the traditional ones, are closely interlinked with body therapy. So it's just anything really, from the traditional Egyptian dances to Turkish and everything else. So yeah. Okay.
And I would like to talk a little about cinema. Like, what? Firstly, do you like cinema, and do you like movies?
I love movies. My brother did an undergraduate degree in film studies. So he sort of introduced me to the theoretical side of films, and I had a few film courses during my undergrad studies as well. So yeah, I always loved movies.
And do you love them more like to watch or to create or even maybe participate?
About the participation, I would say no, but it's really, I do watch movies as a means of escapism, to escape reality and to detach from time to time, the same way as I do with reading.
Yeah.
But I guess being a philologist, you can't escape watching a movie critically or reading a book. So I do tend to make a lot of notes when I watch films.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes, I basically just analyze them. I try to analyze them every time that I watch them, mark everything down that I find interesting in the movie, and sometimes even rewatch it and stopping so I can, add in my notes.
And what is the first movie that pops in your mind? Like, which one is your favorite one?
Oof. See, I call myself a trash bin when it comes to movies and books, because I literally read every single genre and I watch every single genre of a film. So I would have to pick out my favorite genres.
Okay.
But actually the first one that comes to my mind, I was rewatching the trailer for Denis Villeneuve's film adaptation of Frank Herbert's novel Dune. I'm really excited about the film. So sort of, you asked which movie first popped into my head. So I'm really excited for that one.
Okay.
Yeah. And also American Psycho, because I rewatched the movie just recently because one of my students is writing his extended essay on it.
Yeah.
So, I made some preparatory notes as well to help the student out. So,
Yes.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we actually now go to our next part and second half of our episode, and now I'd like to talk a little about teacher's job. You've mentioned that it was quite a surprise that you won that award, the favorite teachers award. But when did you realize that you wanted to become a teacher? Like, how did you become a teacher?
I wouldn't say it was some sort of cathartic experience where I woke up and decided, yes, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I wouldn't say it's now that it's something that I want to do for the rest of my life. I really easily get bored. Boredom is something I struggle with. And I like to have a variety of professions to choose from. So that's one of the reasons why I don't limit myself only to teaching, that I do translation, editing. I try to be a part of many I try to be a part of as many educational projects concerning Shakespeare and theater as possible. But probably with teaching at university, it just sort of happened naturally. I worked as a nanny during my last years of high school and during my undergrad studies. And when I was working as a nanny, I sort of naturally started teaching the children I was working with, because I worked with foreign families. So I communicated in English and we did some practices, and then, just job offers started to come in, and I thought I would give it a go. I started out as, actually, I never thought I would be teaching in school. That I can give you, because for a few years now, I worked as a business English teacher, and I taught academic writing skills to university professors and lecturers. So that's an interesting thing that happened. And I actually said that I will never be a primary teacher. So I guess you should be careful when saying that you're never going to do something, because you do end up doing it. But nevertheless, I think as a profession, teaching is it's very giving, in a sense that you don't only give knowledge to others, you receive knowledge in return. And it's very, I find a lot of sense and sort of just fulfillment in it.
Mm-hmm.
There's something, again, very hard to describe, but it's, whenever we have really good lessons, both intellectually and sort of on a human level, when I shut down my laptop, you just have to take in and sit. Sometimes I just sit in silence after lessons because it was so good. You want to take in the moment and enjoy it. And yeah, it's sort of, again, it's about reciprocity. When you're able to establish a reciprocal relationship with your students, meaning that you not only give and take, but there's, a cycle going on. You exchange information, you exchange dialogue, and knowledge. There's just something about it. I think it's one of the highest degree of us as human beings, is being able to participate in reciprocal relationships. So I guess this is where I find most meaning in teaching.
Okay, and how did you feel? I'm very interested when you came to class for the first time, or I don't know, whatever, in your maybe a business English teacher, or maybe as a primary teacher. And how did you feel when they your students called you a teacher for the first time? Was there any kind of shock or just a teacher?
No, I wouldn't say it was a shock when someone called me a teacher. The shocking experience that I had is when, completely understandable, the primary kids, they sometimes mix, instead of calling me a teacher, they call me mom.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of you go well, so that's a bit of a more shocking experience, I think, as you would say. But it was scary. Definitely scary at first, but I actually started out with individual students. So I had some time to build up my confidence before entering a classroom full of students. And it was scary. It was scary in the sense that I was 22, 23, and I would come into a class full of, businessmen, just the 22-year-old plain me trying to teach them something about business English, talking with CEOs and everything. So it was scary. But again, I think it was as scary for them as it was scary for me at the end of the day. You usually find out that this collective feeling of scariness is mutual. And you do need some time to build up your confidence. But I guess with practice comes the confidence that you look for. So I would say that, and the company that I started working as a teacher was very understanding, and they created the best possible environment for me to feel confident and to feel safe as a starting out teacher.
Okay, and now do you have any goal as a teacher?
Goal as a teacher?
Yeah.
That's a good question, although I don't know I know the answer to it. It's sort of just for my students not to feel bored for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a long-term goal that does not finish, because I'm not very fond of setting up goals that do have a finish. I like there to be a natural continuation from one thing to another. But probably if I can admit this, then yes, I do have a small goal, but I'm still keeping it to myself because I'm just starting out. I wanna implement more holistic teaching approaches into the way I teach not only children, but actually you older students as well, through theater and literature.
Okay.
But that's as far as I'm going to say. I don't want to go ahead of myself.
Okay. And now, do you like to be a teacher?
Do I like being a teacher? I do. I mean, it's difficult when, on difficult days, it is difficult. And you start to question everything sometimes that you're doing, if what I'm doing is honest. and if my students are interested enough, and do I have enough practice to do everything that I want to do? But these doubts are inescapable. They're always there, and they're natural. They're a part of every sort of experience. But I do love being a teacher.
Okay.
Actually.
And
because I love to talk.
Okay, and my favorite question actually is, what did you learn from being a teacher, like while you are a teacher?
Patience.
Okay.
I would say patience, and to be able to, well, not see myself as a center of the universe, as we human beings sometimes tend to do this. To step into someone else's shoes, and as I said so before, to build reciprocity is an act of humility. You have to step away from the sort of inherent self-centeredness that we have in our human nature.
Okay.
So I guess the biggest takeaway from being a teacher is learning how to be patient and understanding that, the world exists outside your head.
Yeah. Okay. And now we're just gonna go to our last section, which is philosophy. I really want to talk a little about it. It's because it's actually very, very broad part, like very broad, philosophy is broad. And firstly, do you often philosophize in life? Do you
define what philosophize means? Sorry, I can't escape my teacher Domino.
Maybe I would say it's do you often think about existential questions and do you look for your like meaning of your life?
Well, obviously, as a being a young person, I think especially being in sort of mid-20s, you can't escape the big life questions, and they're always in my head.
Yeah.
Every single day. And I do tend to turn to books of philosophy and literature in order to find these answers. And I do have a lot of friends who actually studied philosophy.
Okay.
So it's always interesting to engage in conversations with them. And but at the end of the day, I think by looking at different sorts of philosophy branches, we tend to create a philosophy of our life of our own. But if we're talking about the big questions, yes, they're always on my mind, even this very moment. So yeah.
Okay. And what philosophy is to you? Like, what is philosophy to you? Is it does it take very? I mean, I just want to ask, how much of your life does it take? Like, is it very? Is it very big and just it makes you to feel a little depressed, I would say, or a little maybe somewhere else, or is it just talking? Because we because often I meet people with or just hear sayings that philosophy is such a I would say like shit grinding art, like it. I mean, it's not my opinion, just just saying like it's a little time wasting. What is it to you?
You mean reading like theoretical books, right, on philosophy?
Yeah.
No, I would not say that. To be honest, to be fair, I started reading like philosophy books a few years back when I started out as a translator, because what I do, I basically translate philosophical articles from Lithuanian into English. Therefore, I do need to have a vague idea of the context that I'm translating in. And I'm by no means a philosophy student in the sense that I'm able to understand it on the level that actual people who graduated from philosophy do. But as I mentioned, a few of my friends do study philosophy. So my philosophization, if I could say this, is more based on a spoken level, on a spoken discourse, in a sense that they come to me and they want to tell me about their final thesis they're writing from a philosophical field, and we sort of discuss and talk and, you know, open up different philosophical theories and everything. So as I mentioned, I am looking into the body-mind philosophy at the moment, just because of the body trauma studies that I've been doing. And yeah, because I am really interested in body therapy. So I don't know, maybe a license in 2 years, we'll see. But so yeah, I'm just reading a lot on that, and that follows a sort of the philosophical tradition from René Descartes. So so yeah, I wouldn't call that, I mean, it is quite pretentious. You could say that sometimes it can get a bit pretentious, but I think if you're able to acknowledge that pretentiousness and understand and catch yourself in those moments when you're being pretentious, and reflect on them, then that's fine, I think. So yeah, I'm sort of, I wouldn't say I'm indifferent, but I don't make a big deal out of it. You know, I just read because it's interesting. I'm interested in learning new things, and I want my mind to be working. So yeah.
And you know, you just stole my mind. You stole my last question. But lastly,
did I?
Yeah, while preparing for our recording, you mentioned me that you were currently interested in body therapy. Just that you mentioned, and could you tell more about it?
Well, you know, body therapy is a very interesting thing in a sense that with your usual psychotherapy, you only or cognitive behavioral therapy, you only work with your mind, in a sense, completely forgetting the body, your body, and the way body remembers trauma. You're making, you know, you're cutting the bond between the body and mind. And what body therapy does, it allows you to understand your mind through the bodily sensations. It's sort of like, in a way, incorporating sensory studies as well. And it's through movement, through yoga, through dancing. It's, you know, because our bodies, they're like maps. You know, they carry certain, we have pressure points, you know. So basically everything is written on our bodies. Everything that we might be suffering from mentally, everything is encapsulated in our bodies. So sometimes to treat trauma, you can approach, to treat psychological trauma, you could start by treating your body first and by looking and listening to your body. So I've just been reading a lot about that, honestly, because I started noticing in people that we sometimes tend to be as if outside our bodies, you know, not in tune with our bodies. Our minds are not in tune with our bodies. So yeah, I've been just practicing a lot of yoga myself, and yeah, just seeing what happens. In a way, learning new things about human bodies.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. So that was my last question, actually, and yeah, here was Greta Kaikarytė, English teacher, and I guess we're finished here. And if you want anything to add, you can now.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Rapolas. It was a pleasure being here, and thank you for having me. It was a surprise you actually invited me as well. Again, one of those unexpected things. So yeah, and it feels very weird to be on the other side, meaning not to be the one who's interviewing, because and anytime you would say something, I would want to go like, what do you mean by this? Please explain this. How do you define this? You know, so the teacher sort of is still somewhere at the back of my head, but thank you. It has been wonderful. And yeah, maybe one day you can step in as an English B teacher for me.
Oh, we'll see, you know. But thank you for coming, and that was really, really great. And thank you for listeners for listening. Thank you for subscribing, and you can find now all podcasts, all episodes, if not in YouTube, then in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now even in Google Podcasts. And that was it. Here were the podcast with Greta Kaikarytė and me, Rapolas Kazakevičius, and see ya next time.
Thank you. Bye.